a 29F, had a nightmare relationship with an older man, 45M, in college. Now I'm worried what to do when I run into him again. When I was 21, I dated a guy who was too old for me. Kevin was 37, an older student in my university program. I just gotten out of a bad relationship and thought Kevin was great. Of course, it was red flags all over the place, but I was so naive back then that I didn't question any of it. I thought I was mature enough to handle it. I thought he was the kind of older, experienced man who would treat me well. It didn't take long for me to realize I was completely wrong, though at the time I tried to convince myself otherwise. Kevin and I dated for 6 months. He quickly told me he loved me, and before I could even process the weight of those words, he asked me, pretty aggressively, to move to his home city to be with him after graduation. At the time, I thought it was romantic. I thought it meant he saw a future with me, and I liked feeling wanted after what I'd just gone through with my ex. Still, it was one red flag after another, but I kept pushing those gut feelings aside. Stupid me thought I was just overthinking everything. In the final semester of my senior year, I got a diagnosis that would change my life. I was diagnosed with cancer, and my world kind of fell apart. The day I received the news, I had no idea how to process it. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me, like I was suddenly untethered. That same night, Kevin and I went to a party. I still remember standing there, trying to hold it together, when I saw Kevin making out with another woman in front of me. It felt like a punch to the gut, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I left the party in tears, barely able to comprehend what I'd just seen. Later that night, he broke up with me over email. In his email, Kevin said we weren't a good fit anymore because of my impending medical emergency. He told me he'd only dated me out of pity after my last abusive relationship and that he'd never really wanted to be with me in the first place. To twist the knife even further, he added that all our friends thought I was annoying and that no one actually liked me. Reading his words, I felt shattered. I'd never felt so disposable in my life. It was like he took everything I was already struggling with and stomped on it for good measure. The memories of that week are mostly a blur. I had to drop out of school midway through the semester and apply for a medical leave of absence. My mind was in complete chaos as I tried to figure out how to move forward with my life. At the same time, Kevin started following me around campus, demanding that I forgive him. He would corner me in public, acting as if I owed him something. I remember one day I finally snapped. I asked him if he was apologizing for what he'd done. He looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Of course not, I didn't do anything wrong. But it's not fair that you're angry at me like this." Hearing those words, I realized there was no point in engaging with him. I told him to go to hell and focused on getting my paperwork squared away so I could move back home and start treatment. That period of my life was a nightmare I don't like revisiting. I became deeply depressed and started having suicidal thoughts. I started seeing a psychiatrist while undergoing chemo. It felt like everything was crumbling around me and I could barely hold myself together. To make matters worse, most of my friends disappeared. I guess they didn't know how to deal with my illness. The few who stuck by me are still my friends today. Some of them are now my colleagues, and I'll never forget how much their support meant to me. In the months after I left school, Kevin continued to badger me over text. He kept claiming he didn't know what had gone wrong between us and insisted that I needed to forgive him. I was in the middle of chemo, exhausted beyond words, and couldn't handle his harassment anymore. Just to get him to leave me alone, I told him I forgave him. As soon as I said those words, he vanished. I never heard from him again, and I blocked him on Facebook to make sure he couldn't worm his way back into my life. Later that year, during a brief break between chemo treatments, I went to a university event off campus. I was trying to reconnect with some semblance of normalcy, to feel like a part of the world again. During the dinner, I ended up talking to a woman I'd never met before. She mentioned her fiancé and started talking about their plans. I was only half listening until she mentioned his name, Kevin. My stomach dropped. She was talking about the same Kevin who'd made my life a living hell. I was stunned. I tried to keep my composure and casually asked how long they'd been together. She said they'd been dating for 3 years. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. That meant Kevin had been in a relationship with her the entire time he was seeing me. Everything about our time together was a lie. I barely made it through the rest of that dinner. I left as soon as I could and cried in my car for what felt like hours. I wanted to warn her, to tell her what kind of man she was marrying, but I was too shocked and drained to do anything. I thought about trying to find her on Facebook later, but I didn't even know her last name. And honestly, I was terrified of opening that door and potentially dealing with more harassment from Kevin. In the end, I decided to let it go and focus on my own healing. The good news is I survived. I'm in remission now and have been for years. 2 years after leaving school, I finally felt like myself again and went back to finish my degree. By then, I was in a much better place. I'd made new friends, completed therapy, and started building my career. My life now is nothing like it was back then. I'm well known in my field and have worked hard to get where I am. Recently, my old university invited me back as a guest of honor for an alumni event. My professors want me to speak to the students and network with other successful alumni in my industry. It's an incredible opportunity, and I was so excited when I first got the invitation. But then I saw the guest list. Kevin's name was on it. So was a woman with his last name, who I assume is his wife. My heart sank when I saw it. The guest list is small, maybe 50 people, so it's inevitable that we'll run into each other. I can't back out because this event is important for my career, and I've already committed to going. Plus, I don't want to let fear dictate my choices. I refuse to let this man have any more power over me. But the thought of facing him again is making me lose sleep. I'm not sure how to handle it. Do I treat him like a stranger? What if he tries to act friendly or worse, hugs me like we're old pals? That's the kind of thing he would do. And then there's his wife. Should I say something to her? I'm torn because I don't want to dredge up the past, but I also feel like she deserves to know who she's married to. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I've been going over it in my head again and again, and I still have no answers. Let's read some comments, relevant comments before start next post update. First comment by Midk. I treat him like a stranger. If he acknowledges you, keep a blank, empty smile like you would give a total stranger who seems to think they know you. When he reminds you who he is, oh gosh, I didn't even recognize you. It's been so long. And then if he tries to initiate any conversation beyond that, you shut him down. Sorry, I really don't have time to talk, as you turn and walk away. If he tries to initiate physical contact, you block it and say firmly no. Do your best to keep other people around you at all times. Have a witness in case anything happens. But otherwise, pretend that he doesn't even exist. Either he was going through a very awkward time when you dated and he is a better person now, or he's still as batshit crazy as ever. If he's better, he'll appreciate being treated like a stranger, because he'll also be uncomfortable. If he's still crazy, you lower the risk of inviting, in his crazy brain, more contact from him. Plus, I think it's nice to give people like this a little bit of, our relationship had so little impact on me that I have to be reminded of your existence. She replied to Mick's comment. If he's still crazy, you lower the risk of inviting, in his crazy brain, more contact from him. Good point. I blocked him on FB long ago, but just to make sure I blocked his email address just now. I deleted his number long ago, so I can't block it as I don't even remember it anymore. Second comment by Junger. You don't give him any attention, and you certainly don't approach the girlfriend, although you would like to share a few things. She replied to Junger's comment. The idea of approaching his wife gives me hives. The last thing I want to do is open this Pandora's box. I feel bad for her though. She posted an update. Well, thanks for your feedback, guys. Wanted to give you an update. Something I failed to mention in my last post is that my mom used to teach at my alma mater before she retired not too long ago. For context, she was a beloved professor in my department, and though our professional paths didn't cross much while I was in school, her presence was part of why I initially chose that university. I never told her about my brief relationship with Kevin during my undergraduate years. It just didn't seem relevant at the time, and honestly, I didn't want to explain the mess of it all. But after writing my post, I realized I needed to share the story with her, especially since she'd have some perspective on the kind of environment I'd be walking into at the upcoming alumni event. When I told her everything, about Kevin, about how he treated me during my illness, about running into his fiancée back then, and my anxiety about seeing him again, my mom got this strange look on her face. For a moment, she didn't say anything, which made me wonder if I'd overshared. Then she said, I know exactly who you're talking about. Kevin was in our department for years and I remember him well. She didn't seem surprised at all by his behavior. You don't need to worry about him, she added, and when I asked why, she smiled slightly and said, trust me, you'll see. That guy is kind of a loser. Her comment caught me off guard because my mom isn't the type to speak negatively about anyone, even people who might deserve it. It gave me pause, but I didn't press her further. Instead, I focused on preparing for the event and figuring out how to handle myself in case Kevin turned it into an awkward situation. The event itself ended up being incredible. I followed some of the advice I'd received and invited one of my closest friends to come along as my plus one. She was thrilled to support me, and having her by my side made me feel a lot more confident. From the moment we arrived, I was swept up in the excitement. The venue was beautiful, and I could feel the energy of so many talented people gathered in one space. Right away, I reconnected with a few alumni I hadn't seen in years. some of whom had drifted away during my illness, but who seemed genuinely happy to see me doing so well now. There were hugs, laughter, and long overdue catching up. A couple of professors I admired came over to chat and were so proud of the career path I'd forged since graduation. The warm reception felt like a full-circle moment, especially after everything I'd been through. When it was time for me to give my speech, I was nervous but ready. I shared my story of resilience, how I overcame challenges during my time at the university, and how those experiences shaped my career. I talked about the importance of perseverance and the value of the friendships and mentorships I'd built along the way. When I finished, the room erupted in applause and I could see how moved people were. It was one of the most validating moments of my life. Now about Kevin. He did show up and so did his wife. I spotted them early in the evening but decided to act as if they didn't exist. Kevin looked different. I don't want to sound petty, but it was impossible not to notice how much he'd changed. He'd gained a lot of weight, was balding, and looked older than his age. I later found out from an old classmate that he's now almost 50, which was a shock since he'd lied to me about his age when we dated. Back then he claimed he was in his early 30s, but clearly that wasn't true. I also learned from the same classmate that Kevin still hadn't finished his degree and was now working as a night security guard while taking classes part-time. It was a stark contrast to the image of himself he tried to project when we were together, this ambitious, worldly older guy who had it all figured out. What surprised me most was how obvious it was that Kevin was avoiding me. He wouldn't come near me and seemed to deliberately keep his distance all night. I almost started to think he'd get through the event without speaking to me, but then, during a brief moment when I found myself alone, he finally approached. He looked nervous and awkward as he congratulated me on my achievements. I kept my response polite but distant, a simple thank you and a smile before I walked away. Later he tried to make a dumb joke in passing, but I ignored him entirely. The whole interaction was underwhelming, to say the least. Meanwhile, Kevin managed to make a fool of himself throughout the evening. He repeatedly interrupted conversations with insensitive or irrelevant comments, annoyed several people, and even upset his own wife and one of the deans. By the end of the night, he'd become the butt of a running joke among the guests. It was clear that whatever charm I thought he'd had when I was younger was long gone, or maybe it had never been real in the first place. As the night went on, I felt a profound sense of closure. Seeing Kevin again in all his mediocrity made me realize how far I've come since that painful chapter of my life. The memories of that time, the heartbreak, the illness, the isolation, used to feel so overwhelming. But now, standing in a room full of people who celebrated my success and resilience, I felt free. Kevin wasn't some looming figure from my past anymore. He was just a guy I once knew, a footnote in my story, and not a particularly memorable one at that. The event ended on a high note. I left feeling proud, not just of my accomplishments but of the person I've become. And as a bonus, I recently started a new job that came with a big raise. By the end of this year, I'll have my student loans completely paid off, a milestone I've been working toward for years. Life is good, and I'm so grateful I didn't let one unpleasant person stop me from showing up and shining. Life is good. Thanks for your help, Reddit. Edit. The comments got locked fast. 2 things I wanted to add. First, an acquaintance recently told me that apparently Kevin and his now wife were in an open relationship for a long time, including while he and I were together, and that she closed the relationship again a few years ago because she got annoyed. I can only imagine the shenanigans. I feel better knowing he didn't cheat on her, even though he still cheated on me, and of course he didn't tell me about his wife at all. Whatever. Second, my favorite part of the evening. I blocked Kevin on Facebook years ago, so he's had no updates whatsoever on my life, including the fact that I go by my birth name now. In college, everybody called me by a nickname, but no one's used it now in years. So all night he kept calling me by this super old nickname. People kept looking at him like he was crazy and asking, "Why are you calling her that?" And Kevin got super frustrated because he realized everybody was in on some joke that he didn't understand. No one would clue him in, I guess. Let's read some relevant comments. First comment by Ashley. "Oh, this update gives me life. I'm so happy to hear of your success. Congratulations and well done. So glad you are able to finally move on from this idiot. You are clearly 2 very different people." She replied to first comment. "It's so obvious now that the only reason we were even together was because I was young and naive. Now that I'm almost 30, he doesn't make any sense to me. It's so weird and creepy." Thank you for listening the story to the end. If you enjoy our videos, so don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Have a good day, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it and hit the notification bell icon to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.